Hello, welcome to lecture number 9. Earlier we had looked at the PN junction itself, and now what we are going to do, we are going to address various aspects related to the PN junction. Uh, we are going to look at three different types of detectors. Each detector would address a particular limitation of the PN junction and make it better. So in particular, I'm going to look at the PIN detectors, which are different from the PN junction themselves. Here, what one does is basically increase the depletion region, and there are lots of advantages to that. The second type of detector is the Schottky photodiode, which is a combination of metal and semiconductor. Again, it comes with its own advantages. And at the very end, I will talk about the Avalanche photodiodes, um, which basically combine the high gain characteristics that we found to be extremely useful for detecting low photon flux, or even for that matter, single photons, by something called the Avalanche photodiodes, which basically bring with them this notion of gain, um, large gain that we had found in the photomultiplier tubes themselves. Right. So first, let us look at the PIN photodiode. So in the PIN, what you have is again a semiconductor junction diode. But here, what you have is that there is a gap left between the p-type doping and the n-type doping, and this region actually now starts acting like that carrier-free depletion region um, in the semiconductor. So let's just look at the energetics and then carefully list out the particular advantages of such a detector. So this is the usual setup. What you have is you have reduce, for example, the p-type uh, doping on one side, the n-type doping, and intrinsically separated them out with a region that is undoped, literally. So what you have here now is that there is going to be band bending, of course, because there's going to be diffusion from these mobile charges that will go across. And because this particular region, intrinsic region, is sort of devoid of any charges, it kind of plays the role of this extended depletion region uh, uh, feature in the PN junction. So what has happened here is now the ionized impurities are now situated, if you like, at this junction on the left, right? And because these are acceptor impurities, so they actually get the electron, right? And they are negative, they become negatively charged, when you put them together. And similarly, on this other side, you have the donor electrons, the donor atoms, which donate an electron, so they turn out to be positive. So there is this space charge region which is spatially separated. And you see clearly, if I have something like this, I'm going to now have an electric field, which is more or less sort of uniform across this large intrinsic region. So this has tremendous amount of advantages, right? So one is that there is an increased depletion layer width. That would mean two things. One is that the region for light capture that will lead to drift of electron and hole across these two junctions, right? Across these two junctions of the PIN diode, you know. Uh, if they are going to be literally be much larger than the usual PN junction region, right? So in that sense, one has increased, sort of the intrinsic quantum efficiency of such a device by, creating this intrinsic large depletion region between the semiconductor junctions. Other important feature is certainly, that if I take a capacitor and I separate out the two plates, that's the distance between them increases. Clearly, the capacitance decreases. Reduced capacitance implies, right, this junction capacitance being reduced implies that the RC time constant is going to be smaller. That would mean that this PIN diodes are going to respond faster uh, uh, in comparison to the PN junction itself. Um, and again, because this electric field is now literally spread out over a larger spatial distance, so you see that um, the, there is going to be a larger fraction of charges are going to experience, uh, drift in comparison to diffusion, right? Because the region within which the charges are, the electron hole pairs are generated is basically going to largely lie within the intrinsic layer, and hence the drift is going to be dominant in comparison to diffusion. So my average drift length and the ratio, with the diffusion length, you see that this particular ratio is actually going to reduce because the diffusion is going to decrease in comparison to drift. So that again will lead to a faster response. However, you see there is one caveat, that there is going to be, a transit time broadening that is going to be there, because what you have done is now uh, given it a large region for it to drift. Remember that the electron velocity is faster than the hole velocity, and that will lead to those issues related to transit time broadening and so on. But anyway, there is an overall reduction in the capacitance, and there is a overall increase in the efficiency, the creation um, of the electron hole pair and so on, the charge carriers. And this essentially functions in that sense as a more as a detector which has got a faster response in comparison to a normal PN junction. So now let us look at another of such variant, which is the Schottky diode. Now the Schottky photodiode is basically has this following geometry. What you have is a semiconductor material. Imagine that this is n-doped, right? And on that semiconductor material, you are basically putting a thin layer of metal, right? So you see that the metal will have its own free electrons. They are bound. There is going to be a work function for the metal for the electrons to be released. Similarly, there are electrons in the semiconductor which are bound in the valence band. Now, of course, you have put in the n-type dopants, so there are a few impurities here which is creating the dopant level, and there is conduction uh, band which is possible. And again, there is a sort of a work function associated with the release of this electron from the conduction band out into the vacuum, right? And usually what happens is that the work functions of metals is actually larger than the work functions associated with semiconductors. Of course, this is the situation because we are comparing the vacuum level in both the situations. This is just a situation when they are separate. Now for a Schottky photodiode, what one does is to put in this thin layer of metal, right, on top of the semiconductor. So semiconductor material is there, which is n-doped, and then on that one is putting a thin semi-transparent layer of the metal. So remember that the photon is coming from the metallic side, and now you see clearly, because of this the large difference in the distribution of the electrons in the metal and the semiconductor, there is going to be band bending, right? In the sense that these some of these free electrons are going to happily hop around and go on to the other side, right? And so on. So you see that here you are going to now, at the very surface of the semiconductor, you are going to basically create an extremely narrow depletion region, which is where the electric field is finite, and it is not really in the bulk, it's at the surface itself, right? And you have I have of course exaggerated the figure here, but you have this thin layer of metal on the incoming side. Now you see, if you look at the what is the binding, so when the photon comes in, it needs to release this electron from the metal into this so that it can now traverse into the conduction band, right, of the semiconductor, right, and that is where you're going to connect these to the two terminals of the battery. So the electrons are going to be now they are not released from the metal, please remember that. They are simply excited from the metal into the conduction band of the semiconductor uh, n-doped material here. So this energy, binding energy that is required to do that, is basically the difference between the uh, the uh, work function associated with the metal minus the work function associated with the semiconductor, and plus this delta E, which is basically the difference between the impurity level of the n-type doped semiconductor and the conduction band, right. This is this extra energy that needs to be provided for the binding energy. This would be the binding energy that needs to be provided for the electron to be released from the metal into the semiconductor. So you see, there is clearly a cutoff, and because this is a metal, this h nu would typically be in the visible or in UV. So these are detectors that are used largely in these wavelength range, and you require that h nu should be larger than this binding energy uh, to create this transition and release this electron. So you have addressed multiple things here. Again, this is an extremely fast response the Schottky diode entails, and it is uh, can be as fast as hundreds of gigahertz. So it is really a uh, very quick response detector that one can come up with. Of course, given the constraint that you are above the binding energy of such a Schottky photodiode. So let me list out these features carefully and also give you the motivation for why Schottky photodiodes came about. Um, First of all, not all semiconductors can be prepared in both N-type and P-type. That limits the possibility of making PN junctions. So here you can, you require only one type of semiconductor, and you can certainly put in a very, a thin layer of metal on top of it to make a Schottky photodiode. The other very important feature that it addresses is this. Typically when you have photons of the visible wavelength, or for that matter in the UV, you see that these are highly energetic photons which might be much larger than the band gap associated with the semiconductor. So what happens is that these photons, they have a very large absorption coefficient in the semiconductor, hence they suffer the following. This leads to a very significant surface recombination, uh, you know, uh, uh, because of the fact that uh, uh, these photons are going to be absorbed at the surface itself because of the large absorption coefficient. So the photon never really penetrates enough to reach the depletion region, right, for you to create this, and hence, so you see this absorption coefficient being large for these larger frequencies becomes a serious limitation for semiconductor PN junctions. But herein what you have is that you have this metal, and that that can happily have these kind of binding energies. That's the first thing. Plus you are able to create this, you require the absorption to be large at the surface itself, because after all you have now created the depletion region, right, at the surface of the semiconductor itself. So in that sense, one is the weakness in one is utilizing it as a strength in the Schottky design. Um, there is, of course, the limitations that I have already talked about in the PN junction. There is carrier diffusion that happens uh, because so many times the carriers are produced close to the depletion region, not really inside it. and if they are outside the depletion region, however close, they still need to diffuse, to create the external current. So the the fact that the depletion region is bang at the very surface of the semiconductor metal junction there, so the depletion region is not deep inside, if you like. So you see that diffusion is hardly an issue. And you know that on the metal side, certainly once you connect it to a external potential, the electrons will quickly go across, without much resistance and so on. So the Schottky also has a low resistance on the metal side, thus again reducing the RC time constant. Not just that, what people do is also, you know, decrease the surface area of the Schottky. That is the metal patch is extremely small, so that again reduces the RC time constant associated with the Schottky device. So let me give you a few examples. For example, gold on silicon, where silicon is N-type. This is a Schottky diode which is used in the visible. You can have platinum silicide layer put on a silicon of the P-type, which is used, on a wide variety from UV to IR. You can also have platinum on gallium arsenide, and detectors of Schottky diodes of this kind have shown responses of hundreds of gigahertz and so on. So these are, some of the examples of the kind of materials that you can put together to get this get the Schottky. Now, please understand that the platinum, the metallic layer in this, the gold platinum or the platinum silicide layer, these are extremely thin, of the order of about hundreds of angstroms, um, which actually create for you a semi-transparent layer, and extremely thin, because that is what ensures that everything is happening at the surface of the detector. So remember again that this is a high-speed response detector. The particularly if you have the N-type doping, and so you see that the electron has very large mobility, and hence it is faster. A depletion region at the surface itself, thus eliminating surface recombination. So overall quantum efficiency has increased. Plus this thin semi-transparent metal layer is only about, let's say, tens of nanometers or hundreds of angstroms, which is extremely small in comparison to the wavelength, and so it really helps in that manner. The slow diffusion of the electron outside the depletion region is certainly reduced, and one can get bandwidths of about hundreds of gigahertz. As I told you, this bandwidth increase can ideally be got by ensuring these two things, which is, on the one hand, you are decreasing the area of the Schottky diode, and you're also creating this the depletion layer at the surface itself. Now let's look at another family of photodiodes, and these are again extremely popular and used very widely for detecting, for example, single photons. So these are avalanche photodiodes. Clearly the word avalanche tells you that this is going to somehow mimic that particular avalanche like multiplication of the photoelectrons or photocarriers generated, but this is going to happen within a, a semiconductor. So that is the beauty of this avalanche photodiodes, and they are extensively used in this mode called the Geiger mode, where they actually detect particle by particle or single photons at a time. So this is the sort of the doping that is done, right? So let's look at the top figure. Your photons are coming from one side. These are various layers of the semiconductor material. you have a large intense doping of p-type material. By p plus I mean that there is sufficient density, a larger density of the acceptor atoms or impurity atoms that you're doping on here. And then there is a uh, weakly doped p-type material, right? And again the doping increases a little. The uniformity of doping is very crucial to the quality of this avalanche photodiodes. uh, and then followed by a extremely large n-type doping here, right? So there is a n-type doping that will basically lead to sort of a charge. The ionized donor atoms will be in this region, right? And the ionized, for that matter, the acceptor atoms will be here, but they are not merely located here, but they are spread out across this uh, whole junction, right? So what have we done? One has basically, because the ionized carriers are, make sure that this whole region is depleted of free carriers. So you see, what one has done is gotten the benefit of the PIN junction, right? Because the intrinsic region, which is basically this region, has has a constant electric field, which is devoid of free carriers at the moment. So when the photon comes in, it can be absorbed all the way through, all the way from this, from the left to the edge of the pi doped region on the other side. And this large region actually increases the quantum efficiency of such a system. Not just that, because this whole region contains a finite electric field, the charge carriers that you generate here are going to be swept across, with some drift velocity. That is the, that is kind of the feature of the PIN, diode that you have sort of incorporated in this design of the APD, right? The avalanche photodiode. The other very important thing is this large doping of the n-type on the right creates an extremely large field at this junction. So, right, there is a very large electric field that is localized, within this small region, accompanying this N plus and the P region, right? This large, you remember that the field was in the negative direction? Right, yeah, right. The same thing happens here. There is a large electric field because of this large density of the dopant, ionized donor atoms. So if you look at the space charge distribution, this is how it looks like. There is this large collection here, right? And this forms a large electric field which is localized within this junction. And then there is a reasonable amount of electric field which is spread across. So you see, uh, this kind of electric field distribution does the following: that of course the electron hole pairs can be generated anywhere in between, and all of them will contribute to a current being, because they are going to be driven across by this electric field. Not just that, as they come to this region, you see the electrons are going to be speeded up because of this large electric field, and if they get sufficient kinetic energy, they can actually dislodge other electrons which are bound and create electron hole pairs, right? Giving up, that energy, the energy associated with the energy gap or the band gap, so there the incoming electron will basically, have a collisional ionization. It will create a collisional ionization of the electron hole pair within that, uh, within the semiconductor. So of course this is not ionization in the sense that the electrons are not released, but you see the electrons are released from the valence band to the conduction band. So I will of course show you a picture of that in the next slide. But I think this is the main idea, that you not only have a drift where you are sweeping the charges fast, you are also multiplying the charges within this avalanche region. This avalanche region is crucial for you to create this the multiple electron hole pairs, which actually contribute to larger current through the external device. So this is how this is the doping concentrations. This is how it is going to be again connected in the reverse bias. So so this is the large electric field within the avalanche region. So there is a normal region, there is a avalanche region, the depletion region is all over the place, plus there is the extra avalanche region, and that is what really creates this the nice multiplication of charge carriers. The other important thing is that even though one has created this large avalanche here, it is also a very thin region. So what happens is the avalanche also terminates very quickly, and that is very important because you want the device to be ready for the next photon, right? So it increases the speed. The quenching of the avalanche quickly is as important as creation of the avalanche. If you want to increase the the response time of a detector, and that is all these beautiful features have been put together smartly by engineering this kind of doping within the semiconductor. So let us just look at the energetics of this, to give you some feeling of it. Clearly, you see that this is basically the avalanche region, which I have now drawn here. The energetics within that region. So this is my E gap between the valence band and the conduction band. This is what is my N plus doped region. This is my P doped region, and there is this large electric field in the avalanche. So imagine the photon comes in. This is my transition, the very first one on the left. The photon comes in, it creates electron hole pair. The electron could also come in from the other intrinsic region, no issues. So once the electron enters this region, see, it gets accelerated. This large field acceleration creates basically impact ionization. It basically creates another electron hole pair at this spatial location. I'm just indicating that. And this electron which was coming in loses that much of energy which it has given to create this new electron hole pair, right? So this electron has lost its energy. The loss of energy is of the same amount as the E gap required to release this electron hole pair. And now you see two of these electrons are rushing across. And now either that one or the one which is new can again create a impact ionization and create another pair, and so on and so forth. This is how the multiplication process happens, where the original electron that creates the impact ionization loses its energy, okay, comes down, whereas the new electron takes away that energy to be released from the valence band to the conduction band. So this is the kind of energy picture that one should have in mind, and you are basically multiplying, you're creating this extra kinetic energy, which allows this multiplication of charge carriers. And you see there are APDs in which both of these electrons as well as holes can create this impact ionization. Some of them only largely dominant as electrons, but all of these are dependent on the material which is used and so on. I'm really not getting into that detail, but this whole business of ionization and dealing with it carefully is actually very instructive. But anyway, so let's look at only the gross features of it, without getting into the mathematics of it. So I have summarized here the sequence of sort of events and also the features. The electrons acquire large kinetic energy, and this energy needs to be larger than the band gap. Only then it can deliver that energy to the electron hole pair which is going to be generated. And this large electric field leads to this large acceleration of the charge, right? So your quality of the semiconductor material has to be literally very good, so that you have this large possibility of large acceleration within the material. The generation of the secondary electron hole pair is through impact ionization, The original electron loses the E-gap amount of energy required at each ionization event. This is the energy which is utilized by the new pair to be released and become free and contribute to current. The very important features are here. The impact ionization clearly is proportional to the strength of the electric field, of course, and it is also inversely proportional to the temperature of the device. Now, how is that? Because as you increase the temperature of the device, you see there is going to be more randomization of the electron motion within the semiconductor, and you see this, and there is going to be greater frequency of scattering or collision which is going to happen, right? So this collisional scattering is going to increase with increase in temperature, and because this collisions will again sort of draw out the kinetic energy that is required for ionization, that is going to be taken away because of this because of the increased frequency of collision. So this reduces the opportunity for gain, uh, you know uh, and you're not able to reach that kinetic energy limit, which should be such that it should be larger than E gap. So the the impact ionization is indeed inversely proportional to temperature. So cooling these devices actually increases the multiplication factor. So now let's look at uh, the main features sort of listed out. So I'm essentially probably repeating, but it's important to put them all together. Plus, I'll give you a few numbers here. There is an increased reverse bias. That's what you need to put in to create this avalanche breakdown. You require to create strong enough electric field. The space charge which is generated just by putting these this kind of doping together is not enough. You need to put in this extra reverse bias that leads to sufficient amount of space charge generation, and which can lead to the avalanche breakdown. So there is a certain amount above which the the avalanche breakdown or the multiplication would happen. The APD are operated above that breakdown voltage. Below that they are just like your normal, more like the PIN junction, not like the usual PN junction, but they are they need to be operated for multiplication. You need to operate above this breakdown voltage. The other important thing is that these are very simple, these are robust, and they can detect single photons because of this large multiplication factor. Uh, Other important thing, very unlike the PMT tubes, is that this result usually in uniform large current pulses. The pulses are uniform because of this the feature of repeatability which is inbuilt into this device, which is just a semiconductor material, right? And the gain can be as large, not just roughly about 10 to the power of 4, 10 to the power of 5. That's the kind of gain that one can get. The pulse rise times are quick. They can be as fast as tens of picoseconds. And there has to be a quenching of the avalanche, and that quenching roughly gives you a dead period of 1 microsecond. This is a period within which if the next photon comes, you won't be able to distinguish between the original one and the next one, and hence there is a sort of a dead period within which the detector is ineffective to distinguish between the two, right? It's very compact, it's easier to cool, right? It requires much lower voltages in comparison to the PMT, right? Much easier to cool in comparison to PMT, which are much bulkier. They are certainly much more compact in comparison to a PMT. And other important thing is, in a laboratory there you might have various stray magnetic fields, which with lots of switching and so on. So it is insensitive to magnetic field, unlike the PMT, which is extremely sensitive, because there you have is basically electrons traveling in vacuum. So uh, This insensitivity to magnetic field is another nice feature of the APDs. Uh, if you now look at the quantum efficiency, as you know, this is well within the semiconductor technology, which we understand very well. The quantum efficiencies can be as large as 70%, right? Um, in comparison to PMT, whose efficiency is limited at most to 25-30%. It cannot go better than that. So you see clearly there is a large benefit in terms of quantum efficiency. The other important thing is that it requires cooling, yes, and one can do either thermoelectric cooling or place the detector within liquid nitrogen bath, which gives you a temperature of about 77 Kelvin. So because these are extremely small and compact, they can be easily cooled in comparison to a PMT. You need to create external circuit with this APDs so as to quench this avalanches. There should be a way to protect against this runaway avalanches, which can be done by switching, for example, the bias. So this large reverse bias can lead to very large fields and lead to runaway avalanches. These need to be quenched through an external circuit, and that care has to be taken so that the APD does not get damaged. Uh, Again, remember, we have a narrow multiplication region. That would mean the region of avalanche is localized, and hence it can also be dealt with more easily in terms of control of the avalanche is possible better with the APD, than otherwise. Now people have actually come up with very large area APDs. The APDs are also used, for example, in LiDAR applications, where what you're getting is extremely weak backscattered photons. So one can really have very large area APDs, all the way about comparable to about a centimeter square area. So such large APDs have also been made. So now let us look at the IV characteristics of the APD. Um, this is basically, the IV characteristics. Uh, on my left, I am plotting the current, right? On my right, I am plotting the corresponding gain associated with this multiplication, of the avalanche from the avalanche, and on my x-axis is my voltage. So clearly, I am in the reverse bias. If you do not put in so this is if you do not put in sufficient amount of voltage, you see you're not going to basically see much happening. Beyond a certain voltage, you get this linear increase in the current, right? And you see that beyond a certain something called the punch through voltage, where you create sufficient electric field, you get into this gain regime. This is where unless you put in this extra voltage, you're not going to enter this avalanche region. And you see, moment you have this region, you're not only going to have the photocurrent, which is the black line, right? So electrons are coming in, the photons are coming in, electron hole pairs are generated, and this is what creates the photocurrent. This is how it goes. There is also a dark current associated, because moment you switch on the avalanche, there is going to be thermal excitations, and the other excitations like cosmic rays, and for that matter even radioactivity and things of that kind are again going to contribute to the dark current. So there is a multiplication of the dark current itself. So you'll basically play around with this applied reverse bias voltage to be in the regime so as that the photocurrent gain dominates in comparison to the dark current and so on. There is of course this breakdown voltage beyond which there is a runaway situation with the avalanche, and this particular response curve is for the indium gallium arsenide APD, which is a rather famous APD in the communication wavelength region. The electric field values can be comparable to 10 to the power of 5 volt per centimeter. That's significant, just by applying just 10 volts across the device, so which is very nice in comparison to tens of kilovolts being applied in a PMT, 1 kilovolt to 10 kilovolts. So there is suddenly much more compact. Uh, there is much lower business. There's no high voltage business at all, and you can get very large gain. The gain bandwidth product can be as large as 100 gigahertz. Again, please remember that this gain bandwidth is always going to be a product. They're going to play against each other. Larger the gain, longer time you're going to require to quench uh, the avalanche. That would mean uh, shorter is going to be your uh, rather slower is going to be your response, because you are going to create a larger dead time. So this gain bandwidth product is always going to be uh, uh, working in contrast with respect to each other, and this can be as large as hundreds of gigahertz. All right. So thank you.